the intimidation became more and more serious. A police helicopter began hovering overhead with 5 squad cars there in front of the home. Today, not just in California, but in states across the country, homeschoolers have a new threat, a new challenge. You see, there's a widespread diversity of parents who homeschool throughout the United States. And it's wonderful. It's something that should be preserved and protected. Parents have that right. However, social workers with a secular, humanistic worldview oftentimes have a different agenda that doesn't meet up with the values and beliefs of parents who are homeschooling. We're seeing social workers stepping in and taking those children from those families under the guise of emotional neglect or emotional abuse. When in actuality, those parents are loving parents doing a great job. They just don't want to encourage their child to engage in relationships or change their gender in a way that's contrary to what they believe and their values. So we at Pacific Justice Institute have had to get involved in a number of case matters to protect children from being taken. This is no longer just theory or a possibility. We're talking about real parents, real families losing their children because of sexual orientation or gender identity decisions by their minor children. Here's an example. A Christian family had a teenage daughter, and this daughter had some emotional issues, so they went to counseling, and it was a government-sponsored psychiatrist program. Well, the psychiatrist determined, from a secular humanist worldview perspective, that this girl should have her gender changed. So they contacted the social worker to find out if the parents were going to cooperate with what this psychiatrist had deemed was necessary for this child. The social workers asked the parents, they said, are you willing to change the gender of your child, to have her operated on, cut on, and injected with hormones and permanently sterilized to change their gender? The parents said, absolutely not. We're a Christian family. This isn't what we believe. This is not what's right for our daughter. We know our daughter. This is a terrible decision. We're not going to do this. The social worker then said, very well, we will take your daughter and we, the state, will become the guardian to do what we think is best for your daughter. And that's what they did. They took that daughter and began the legal process for the state to become the guardian so that they could begin the medical procedure on this daughter, life-changing, life-handicapping procedure on their daughter. We at Pacific Justice Institute were contacted. We went into court and we persuaded the judge that this had serious constitutional consequences. The judge agreed with us and allowed the daughter to go back with the parents. Unfortunately, this is probably not going to be the way it's going to end up in other cases across the country. And that's why we at Pacific Justice Institute are encouraging parents in these kinds of very critical situations to contact us immediately for free legal counsel and or representation. The stakes are simply too high. Sometimes though, parents who are homeschool their children will be challenged. They're challenged because a neighbor perhaps next door doesn't have children. They may not understand homeschooling. They may have suspicions or prejudice against homeschoolers. So they call social workers and say, I have a reasonable suspicion that there may be abuse happening here. This really happens. In one such case, we were contacted by the parents when a social worker showed up on the door and they, along with a police officer, said, we're here to investigate. We want to come in and interview your child. And we want to also inspect your home. They contacted us as this was happening. And I told them, I said, absolutely not. You have a right for them not to have to enter your home. You have a constitutional right. Is there any evidence of an emergency? Is there something that's happened that would cause them to have justifications in certain circumstances where there's a life-threatening emergency? They said, absolutely not. I said, okay, you have that right not to do that. And as it turns out, it became more and more intense. The intimidation became more and more serious. A police helicopter began hovering overhead with 5 squad cars there in front of the home. The police says, here, we have a warrant. I said, okay, have them show you the warrant. Which boxes are checked? Which ones are not? I said, that warrant is not a valid warrant to enter your home. So I want you to tell the police officer, just repeat after me. Say, officer, our home is not locked. We have no weapons. We will not use any physical force to resist you from coming in our home. But you do not have our permission to enter our home. Did he hear that? Is he shaking his head? Okay, I want to say it one more time. We said it one more time. But they still weren't going to leave. So then what we advised is for the parent's daughter, she was about 15 years old, to open the window in her bedroom, which was on the front of the house, and from the screen ask the police to come over to her window, that she'd like to talk to them. And then we advised the parents to have their cell phone video turned on and videotape their daughter talking to law enforcement. And their daughter expressed to law enforcement from the heart what she was thinking and feeling. You know what she thought and felt? She yelled at the law enforcement with tears running down her face, saying, why are you doing this to us? I love my mom and dad. My mom and dad are great parents. I want to be with my parents. Why are you doing this? Why are you traumatizing our family? And then the police officer noticed that this was being recorded. And at that point, law enforcement went back into their cars and they left. The helicopter overhead ceased. And then I advised the parents on what they needed to do. And then had the children examined by a private pediatrician and a private child psychologist or psychiatrist, one ideally that's recommended by their church. And so they did that. They had in writing an assessment stating that there's no reasonable suspicion of abuse or neglect. They then sent these via certified mail to the social worker and the head of their agency. You know, 99% of the time, it's over. They can then come home and there's no longer a threat. This was probably the 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 1,000 times that in actuality, it didn't work. And they went ahead and took the child anyway. We at Pacific Justice stepped in, we went into juvenile court, and 2 weeks later, we got the child back with the family and the case was over. Unfortunately, if parents don't take these kinds of remedial measures and efforts, their children are taken and there's nothing they can do then. They can't bring in a pediatrician. They can't bring in a child psychologist that's neutral. And because of that, the social worker and their agency tells the story that they want to be told to justify keeping the child. You know, that social worker and their agency, they get about $8,000 from the federal government for every child they take per year. We at Pacific Justice Institute have prepared online an article which talks all about what they need to do. It's 12 steps to protect your children from CPS or social workers. They can download that for free. The good news is if they're equipped and they're proactive, the odds are greatly in their favor that they will not lose their children. Throughout history, parents have been challenged over the upbringing of their children, whether it's the government or by invaders. And yet, parents instinctively know it's not something that can ever be surrendered. We at Pacific Justice Institute understand that. We are committed to defending the rights of parents, and we're willing to do so without charge as is needed. No matter what the assault, no matter what the challenge, no matter what the attack, our children are worth the struggle. Let's unite. Let's be resolved in our faith as followers of the Lord Jesus Christ. And no matter what the struggle, never, never surrender our children and be positive, responsible parents for them and their legacy.
God is love, and love comes from God. In 1 John, the Bible tells us that God is not only all-loving, but that He actually is love itself. The heart of the Parent Compass television show is to bring the transforming love of God to families everywhere. In every Parent Compass episode, true stories reveal family struggles and how their lives were radically changed by the love of God. Parent Compass, an award-winning television series, is completely funded by people like you. If you have been touched by God and you want to share God's love to others, would you please pass it on? Jesus tells us to go into all the world and to tell about Him. With your donation, you allow us to take this television show into many different nations and in many different languages, free of charge. And a portion of your donation goes to Parent Compass Outreach to feed starving children. Your gift does so much. To make your tax-deductible gift, go to parentcompass.tv/donate. That's parentcompass.tv/donate. And thank you for sending love and hope around the world.